What is up, everybody, and welcome to the 4-8 Men podcast. This is obviously my first one, so I'm so thankful that you're here and that you're joining us. What I really hope this podcast brings is that I hope it encourages you to train physically, but that it also challenges you to train spiritually. And I'm so happy that I have no other one to start off this huge launch than my good friend Adam Klink. Adam is a husband, a father, and just a stud. He is the lead partnership manager with BPN, and he's just a good friend. So welcome, Adam Klink, to the podcast.
Thank you, man. It's a privilege to be your guest on episode number 1.
Hey, there was no one else. Well, I was like, who could I have just the most real conversation with? And I was like, Adam Klink. Who do I reach out to and ask every single fitness question I have? Adam Klink. Who's a great dude? Adam Klink. So all my roads just kept pointing back to you. So
I thought you were going to say I was your only option, that you couldn't find anybody else.
Would that have been better if you were, if I was just like, okay.
It's the only person I can find that'll do my podcast.
Yeah. You were the only person out of 100 that agreed to do it. No, so.
Well, happy to be here, man. Super grateful for you and our friendship. Kind of cool how it started, but I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit.
Yeah, so Adam really is like, if I have a fitness question of like, hey, does this make sense, or should I train up a training style thing? Adam's the first person that I call, and it's awesome because he answers every single time, and it is just the best. So, Adam, can you kind of just tell the viewers and just the listeners a little bit about kind of how we met and kind of how we've kind of just become friends? So,
yeah, gosh, so how we met. I took a position at Bear Performance Nutrition as their lead partnership manager. And part of my job is finding people to work with, whether they're influencers, athletes, that sort of thing. So like early on in my job, webs and Instagram and those sort of things. And like, oh, this person is of interest. And I would dig into them a little bit more. And you were somebody very early on that I just came across on Instagram, and I was like, man, like, I really like this dude and his values and what he stands for. And I don't know what I'm going to do with him, but I'm just going to build a relationship. And so I think I reached out to you to send you product, and little did I know that you had already established a relationship with Nick Bear and BPN. But I guess that just goes to show that like Nick and I have very similar mindsets in just building relationships and friendships, that like you were one of the first people that I gravitated to when I got this position.
Yeah, that's so true. And it was so cool because I've loved y'all's products for a while. And one of my good friends was like, dude, do you know who Adam Klink is? And I was like, And he was like, dude, he literally just like back squatted 500 pounds or ran a sub 5-minute mile. And I was like, that's not even human. But we'll get into that in a little bit because that is just something crazy that you've achieved and just a super high accomplishment. So talking about fitness, so what has that journey been like for you just with fitness, and where did that start?
Yeah, so I think the most relevant place to start, the place anybody cares about, is high school, right? I was a multi-sport athlete. You kind of gravitate in high school to the sport you're best at, something that you have a chance of playing in college. And for me, that was soccer. So I gave up playing basketball, gave up playing football, gave up track, probably by my junior year, and committed myself to soccer. And that landed me a spot on the Rutgers men's soccer team. I was a goalkeeper for 4 years. I stayed for 5 because I redshirted. And in that last year, in my first game of the season, I got back-to-back concussions. And that on top of many more concussions early on in my
like the ball career. Like the ball hitting you, or you like hit the pole or
like collisions with other players.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I knew what I was doing. Like
yeah.
I wasn't like running into the goalpost. But after that many concussions, and I'm talking about like concussions that like I woke up in the hospital, the doctor said like, look, if you want to guarantee yourself any quality of life, we recommend that you stop playing contact sports. So a game into my 5th year in college, everything that I poured my life into athletically came to a screeching halt. And Athletically, that was the low point in my life, and I kind of had to dig myself out of that time. But throughout that time, I wasn't quite ready to be done being an athlete and being competitive, so I stumbled into CrossFit. I had a friend from high school, and he had been to the CrossFit games, and I was like, you know what, this looks interesting. So long story short, I started training CrossFit, and I got into it purely because I wanted to make a name for myself and athletically be successful. But through that, this friend actually, we reconnected. And after college, I moved back home and became the head coach of his gym, which is called CrossFit Krypton in Chesapeake, Virginia. And I really developed a deep love and passion for coaching and helping people. It's probably the one thing that gives me the most gratification in life is to be able to help influence somebody's life for the better. And again, that avenue for me was through fitness at the time. And I was a head coach for 8 years. I competed professionally in CrossFit for 8 years. And again, another long story short, I became an athlete for BPN, and they ended up hiring me after a couple months of being an athlete.
Yeah. Dude, that's so awesome. I didn't realize that you were at Rutgers for 5 years.
One too many.
That's awesome.
But
One too many. Yeah. So if you didn't get redshirted, then you wouldn't have had the 2 concussions.
well, possibly, yeah.
Possibly. But was that because you said that was kind of a dark time after you kind of transitioned out of that into CrossFit? Was soccer something that you like found your identity in, and after that was kind of stripped away, you kind of got into CrossFit, or what was that kind of framework like?
Absolutely. And I think that's a lot of people growing up is people put their identity into something. I think for a lot of kids, like in high school and if they make it to the college level, like your identity is your sport. Like if people asked me what my major was in college, I would have said soccer. Like that in my head, like I went to school to play soccer, and cool, I got an education along the way. And when you get that ripped away from you, especially against your will, like I didn't get to go out how I wanted to. It was really a tough pill to swallow. I remember, for weeks, I had to recover. So it was like I couldn't do much regardless. I couldn't work out. But I remember just like days being like laid up on the couch, lights are off in my house, like not even wanting to watch TV, just being depressed. And CrossFit really is probably the thing athletically that helped bring back that motivation to train and kind of get that competitive edge back that I lost playing soccer.
Because I even grew up playing, because I can relate to that. Because I didn't grow up playing soccer. It was too much cardio for me. So I did baseball. I played catcher. So we were kind of similar. You were the goalie. I was the catcher. We were both kind of the non-runners on the playing field that we were on. But yeah, after I stopped playing baseball, I didn't really realize how much, because I'd played from I was 5 to 19, 18, and just how much of my identity that I'd put in a single sport. Then after, that was kind of stripped away, or that wasn't really stripped away. I stopped playing, but after that transition kind of happened, I kind of realized how much of an emphasis in my life that I'd put into that. So that's cool that you kind of had that moment. It's not cool that you had that moment with soccer, but you had that realization that maybe I, found my identity in that at the time.
Yeah, I think every athlete goes through that in some capacity at some point. Like nobody plays their sport forever, and I think it can be a hole that a lot of people have to fill, and they have to figure out what to fill it with. And I think we can probably get into that in a little bit too.
Yeah, for sure. So as I mentioned earlier, you are the first person, well, you've become really well known for being the first person to back squat 500 pounds and run a sub 5-minute mile in the same day. Not even like in the same vicinity, but literally in the same day, which is just crazy to think about that. What made you want to go try to achieve that?
Yeah, gosh. So in the CrossFit world, this was kind of a challenge that was put out back in 2018. And in CrossFit, when you get your level 1 certification, which is the certification to become a trainer or open a gym, or a lot of people just get it to get it. But the first lecture in that seminar, in that training, is a seminar called What is CrossFit? And they talk about both ends of the spectrum. They talk about the marathon runner who can run a 2-hour marathon. They talk about the power lifter who can squat 1,000 pounds. And they discuss that as CrossFitters, the methodology, we want to be that person in the middle who can run a 5-minute mile and squat 500 pounds. So that concept has like always been in the sport of CrossFit. And it's funny, there was a name for the person who could run a 2-hour marathon, and there was a name for the person who could back squat 1,000 pounds, but there was never a name for the person who could run a 5-minute mile and hit a 500-pound back squat. So in 2018, Dave Castro, he's the one who orchestrates the CrossFit Games. He wrote a book and he argued like if this was even possible, if any of these games athletes here could squat 500 pounds and run a sub 5-minute mile in the same day. And they didn't think anybody could, and nobody had up until that point. So it kind of like through social media became this challenge put out into the world. And when COVID hit, I was signed up for competitions and canceled. So nobody had anything to do, right? We were all stuck at home, and running and squatting is something that's pretty easily accessible. I had a squat rack in my garage, and my background, I had actually run a sub 5-minute mile when I was 16 years old. And I've hit a 500-pound back squat when I was 26 years old. So granted, that was 10 years apart. But in the back of my head, I was like, I feel like I have the capability that if I put in some extra training, like I can do this. So with nothing going on in COVID, I was like, you know what? Let's make this a goal and give me something to train for. And after about 8 weeks of training, I was able to pull it off. And like, it blew up way more than it should have. It hit social media. And I think it was just the fact that absolutely nothing was going on, like no major league sports, no anything. And this happened, and CrossFitters were like, yeah, look what we did. And it just blew up. But I purely did it I'm somebody who trains better when I'm working towards a goal. Like I need to have a goal with my training. And that was purely all that was for. And this kind of took off. And it's crazy to think that was almost what set my life in trajectory wise to where it is today. Like, I think that's why I'm with BPN. That's why BPN signed me as an athlete, was after that feat. I aligned really well with their brand as like this hybrid athlete, and the rest is history.
So I'm still a big kid at heart. Every morning when I wake up, my favorite thing to do is just go eat a big bowl of cereal. But obviously here at 4-8 Men, we are trying to be nutritious and healthy, so we need to find a good alternative for that. Well, if you haven't heard of Magic Spoon, they are legit. They have cereal that has 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and only 4 net carbs in each serving. Only 140 calories a serving. Not to mention, it's keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and it's also low-carb. You can get the variety pack for 4 flavors: cocoa, fruity, frosted, and peanut butter. And the best part is, not only are they super healthy and good for you, but they taste awesome. My favorite is definitely the cocoa. It tastes like I'm eating chocolate, just cereal in my mouth, which is what it is, but it tastes incredible. I also love their peanut butter, and it tastes just like I remember all the cereals that I used to eat growing up. So trust me, guys, this thing is healthy and delicious, and it brings joy to your mornings or your afternoons whenever you enjoy cereal. So go to magicspoon.com/Huff to grab a variety pack and try it today. And be sure to use my promo code HUFF, that's HUFF, at checkout to save $5 off your order. Magic Spoon is so confident in their product that it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee, so if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Get your next delicious bowl of guilt-free cereal at magicspoon.com/Huff and use the code HUFF to save $5 off. Dude, that is just such a cool story. Did you get that your first time, or was that like, because you said you trained for 8 weeks? I mean, if you could, I don't think the normal person could train for 8 weeks and accomplish that. So like, the first time that you were like, I'm going to, on Wednesday, this day, I'm going to go out and do it. Did you get it your first time, or did it take you a couple times to get there?
It took a couple times, and this is kind of like a small side story, not too many people know, but I tried this in 2018 and I got close, but I got injured, and then I kind of shut training down, and then I got into the next CrossFit season and just really didn't give it a go again. But my numbers were pretty close. And I want people to realize that like I wasn't far off from those two numbers starting training. Like people take a look at themselves and they're like, well, I have a 300-pound back squat and a 6.5-minute mile. Like maybe we should set more realistic goals than 5-minute mile and a 500-pound back squat. Cause like the strength component takes a long time to build that sort of strength. Like I remember it took me 8 years to put on 80 pounds on my back squat, to go from like 420 pounds to 500 pounds, 8 years. So that's not just strength that you're going to build in like a couple weeks. But no, my strength numbers were pretty much there. Like when I set out to do this, I was like, all right, I'm going to do a base test. And I ran a 5:43 mile and hit a 485 pound back squat. And then those were the numbers I worked off for 8 weeks leading into it. So I did like a 90% effort test run 6 weeks into it and ran like it was like a 5:13 mile and hit a 500 pound squat. So technically I failed, but it was still part of the process to get to this end goal. And I did. I kind of picked a day, and everything really just kind of came together, and I executed and I got it. I mean, I think there were a lot of factors that, would have been a reason why I failed, but I think just like everything kind of just came together perfectly that day.
And then you just blew up.
It's crazy. Yeah. It wasn't the plan, but super thankful that I am where I am today because of it.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Like, because even when you think about that with like God, like a lot of times, like, because you didn't know that was going to, change the trajectory. So a lot of times it's those moments like that where, you're not trying to, you're not trying to get famous. You're not trying to be super well known. You're trying to just do this really just for yourself, just to kind of prove it to yourself. And then in those moments, the Lord uses that to really give you that platform that He's given you. That's just such a cool story. So you talked about training for 8 weeks with, 90% of, kind of working off of that max you had. So what does your training look like now compared to kind of other things in the past that you've tried to accomplish like that?
Yeah, a little bit different. I have 2 young kids. I have a 10-month-old and a 2.5-year-old. My previous job for 8 years, I was a coach. And if anybody knows anything about like a trainer's schedule, it's usually a split schedule where you work early in the morning and then you go back for an afternoon or a night shift because everybody goes to work in the middle of the day. So I had a really nice schedule where I could train a lot. I was able to be home for my family. And I was able to train previously for anywhere from 1 to sometimes 3 or 4 hours a day, which is why I think I was able to compete at a high level for so long. Nowadays, ever since moving to Texas, I have a full-time job where I'm working. I leave the house at 7:30, get home at 5. My workouts, I never want my training to interfere with my family life. So I purposefully work out at 5 a.m. or 8:30, 9 p.m. before or after the kids are up. And that's just something that that's where my values lie, and family is ahead of fitness for me. So it's definitely changed a lot. And some days I'll have 45 minutes or an hour in the garage to train alone or with my wife a lot of the time, where I used to be in a beautiful gym setting with 5, 10, sometimes 20 training partners, and you feed off of that energy. And it's easy to get motivated and get your energy up and get a good workout in. It's not as easy when you wake up at 5 a.m. and it's cold and it's dark.
And you're by yourself.
You're by yourself in a little garage gym, so it's definitely changed, but I think what it's made me is relatable to other people. I think so often people see professional athletes and even professional CrossFitters and they're like, cool, but I don't have 4 hours a day to dedicate to training. I'll never get there. But I think with my situation, the biggest thing that's come of this back squat and mile is just being able to relate to everybody on just a personal level of like, hey, I get you're busy, I get you have kids, but like, you can still set goals, you can still be consistent, you can still work towards those goals and do things that you want to do.
Yeah, for sure. Because even like what you just said, like I think even sometimes social media can paint this picture because like, you'll see these guys who are like in super good shape, but the backstory is they might train 4 hours a day, and like you'll never get the chance to get to put that much work in. So like you said, even if it's only 45 or an hour a day, you have to just kind of train with what you got. And even after hunting, man, like this life has taken such a just turn with that, and I've had to implement different ways to train in different times. I'm not on the 5 a.m. train, but sometimes I've had to be on the 6 o'clock one, and even that's just so early for me, and just having to carve out time around that. But I know that you have played soccer, you've done CrossFit, you are with BPN now, you've done all these different things, and something that I've walked through, and I feel like probably a lot of guys have too, but have you ever kind of felt like that you went through a time where your training was more about kind of like what you looked like physically, kind of what you looked like more on the outside than actually trying to train to achieve a goal?
Yes, like you always want to look your best. And I think at that point in my life where that was a main priority was in college. Even playing soccer, like out of season, like I would go to the Rutgers school gym and like do my bodybuilding lifting because I wanted to get a big chest and big arms, and for girls, like that's what it was. And there was definitely a point of my life where that was a priority. I will say though that it shifted ever since I got into CrossFit. I felt like I trained for performance, and looks in a sense kind of just followed and weren't relevant if I was performing to the level that I wanted to perform. And that kept me way more content. I think that if you train for looks and aesthetics, you're never going to be content because you're always going to see something somewhere. And social media is a bad place for that, where you want to look a little bit better, look a little bit bigger, look like this person. And it can be really, really tough and make you really just not content with where you want to be.
Yeah, well, because it's so damaging. Like, because I know I've gone through a period of that. Like, I think I was a sophomore in high school, and I was working out like 6 days a week. And like you said, like my emphasis wasn't on like, because I think if you view it as training, like in reaching a goal, so like if I can look back at a month, here's where my levels are at compared to last month. But if you have the mindset of here's what I look like compared to last month, then you're always going to be chasing something that's, you're chasing a rabbit that you're never going to catch. And then you get on social media and you see, a picture, and who knows if that's even legitimate or if that's, enhanced in some way. And then you create this narrative in your mind of, I need to do more, train more. But really, it's about, like you said, if you focus on the goals and not about your looks, then that just kind of comes as a byproduct. And you have to just reframe that mindset of, I can't get so consumed with what I look like. I can't make an idol out of my body because that's just destructive. And, you're never going to, reach that hypothetical goal that you think that you can maybe achieve.
Yeah. Like, I think that's one of the reasons I've always been interested in like bodybuilding as a sport or physique, but I just, in my head, I know how toxic that would be and all consuming. And I know that it would cause priorities to shift in my life. And that's no knock to anybody that does that as a sport or as a living, like all due respect, like it's amazing. And I wish I could do it, but I just know that what that would do to me.
Yeah. Well, we're all different. Like some people can do that. Some people can't. And the fact that you are aware of that I feel like that speaks volumes to to your convictions in that, and you're conscious enough to know that, if you go down that trail, then it might not lead you down the best path that you'd want to go down. So here's how this is our first segment. That's what I'm calling it. This is our physical training. So here's how I want to end each segment from here on. This is kind of the 4-8 Men staple of the podcast. So on each one, I want to ask each guest to give me and the listeners a physical challenge to go out and do this week. So with that, Sir Adam Klink, what physical challenge do you give us? Is it written on the board behind you, or
No,
is
it's
it
not. This
okay?
this is all my work for the week.
I thought you might have had it written on the board.
I can write it on the board for you. But
good.
Coming from the CrossFit world, I'll pick something that's easily accessible, and it's a workout. And I don't know if you've ever heard the workout Cindy, but I love the workout Cindy because it's a full body workout, and literally anybody can do it. You can scale it down however you need to, but it's an AMRAP, which means you'll do as many rounds as possible in 20 minutes of 5 pull-ups, 10 push-ups, and 15 air squats. And I love this workout because no weights are involved. You're only using your body weight. It's a full body workout, but it's a really good test of your fitness. Like if somebody was just starting their fitness journey, or wherever you're at today, if you were to do this test, say you get 10 rounds. You put your best effort in, you get 10 rounds. Well, if you go through your training and weeks and months go by, it would be a good workout to retest, to reevaluate your fitness, and maybe you retest in a couple of months and you get 15 rounds or 20 rounds. But if you're getting 20 plus rounds, you're an elite company.
What are you rocking at that?
I think I've done 26 plus, like in around 27.
20 in 20 minutes?
20 minutes. Each
That's
round, if you're moving
absurd.
and not stopping for all 20 minutes. So I want to hear your score at the end of this week.
What's up, guys? I just want to talk to y'all for a quick second about my good friends over at Groove Life. Groove Life is just the best. I have their silicone ring that I wear every day. Wear it to the gym. Don't miss a gym day. I have their AirPod case. I have their belt. They literally make the best products. The Groove Life ring is the only breathable silicone ring. The grooves in the ring let air in and moisture out, so it's so comfortable that you forget you're even wearing it. And Groove Life actually has all different kind of silicone rings. The one that I wear, and these two right here, these are the Zeus rings, that it literally has 3 rings fused into one. So it gives you that form and the rigid strength of a metal ring, like the one I actually have. But the rings are not all that they make. Here's the Groove Life belt, which is what I wear every single time that I wear a pair of jeans or something that I need to wear a belt. It's the most comfortable belt known to man. They never have to adjust. So even when I'm traveling and I have to take off my belt for the security thing, it slips right off and I just slip it right back on. It's no time. It's the best. I never have to adjust it, and it just clips on. Super simple and super easy. And this belt has the world's baddest buckle. It snaps using high strength magnets, so I can take it off just like that, and I can clip it on just like that. Groove Life also has a 94-year warranty on every product they sell. You can cut it, stretch it, lose it, break it, no problem. Groove Life will replace it. Trust me, you're going to love it. It's the best belt known to man and the strongest rings that are on the market. And with the Groove Life lifetime warranty, there's no risk. Order today to get 2 free mystery rings at groovelife.com/Huff. And from December 11th to the 17th, get 3 rings for $60, 2 watch bands for $60, or 2 belts for just $99. Go to groovelife.com/Huff. That's HUFF, groovelife.com/Huff for the best deals on Christmas presents everyone in your life will love. So I can't wait to do that challenge this week, and hopefully I get 27 rounds minus 12 or minus 15. But what I really want to talk about, so Paul, the Apostle Paul, if you don't know who he is, he wrote 3/4 of the New Testament. He wrote so much. He was an apostle, he was a disciple, and Jesus appeared to him on the road to Damascus, and he had this crazy life encounter. But he wrote us he wrote this verse in 1 Timothy, and this is a letter that he's writing to his protege Timothy. He says that physical training is of some value, but godliness is of value in every way. So that's what we just talked about. We just talked about the physical training. We just talked about how, as believers and as, men, we can train physically, and not that we want to look good, but it's just about, that can help us spiritually. But he says that godliness is of value in every way. And that idea that, the spiritual training, what are we doing for our soul? That is more important than the physical training. So while we don't neglect the physical training, we just always want to put more emphasis on the things that are eternal, being the spiritual training. So Adam, we have talked about how you've hit a 500-pound back squat and a sub 5-minute mile, and we know how you train physically, and I know. Obviously, it's super impressive that you've done that, but I think what's more impressive is that you're a husband, you're a father, you're a believer, and you lead your family for things that ultimately matter. So with that, how do you actually prepare and train for your life to lead them?
Yeah, so that's something that has really evolved for me throughout the years. And I came from a family that was rooted in the church. I mean, we were a family that went to church every single Sunday. It was our routine, almost to the point where, like, when I was younger, I feel like it almost like diminished the value of what going to church meant for me, just because it was like something I did, and not to the point where like I wasn't a believer. Like, I believed in God, and I was saved at a young age, and I was baptized at a young age, and it was almost like I just didn't know any different. And at that point in my life, like even through high school, I didn't really go through any hardships, no trials and tribulation, nothing to test me. So I just had this faith, but I can't say that I was super strong growing up, just because I didn't have anything that forced me to lean on my faith, as I then had later in life. But then you get to college, and I think that spiritual journey changed for me. I no longer had mom and dad pressuring me to go to church. I mean, from afar, right? From, 7 hours away. But those decisions were mine now. And I think, like a lot of people, I went to college. I was on the soccer team. People knew who I was. I thought I was cool. And I didn't go to church much, especially the first probably 2 or 3 years of college. But as I went through college, and as I went in and out of relationships, whether it was with dating or friends, I started to feel like this tug and this void in my life, and it brought me back to church in college. And again, not that my faith like ever went away, not that I had any resentment to church or my relationship with Jesus. It was just there, but that flame was very small and very dim. But I had this tug, and I started going to church on campus, and the first person I met there, his name was Mike Leach, and he was a former professional soccer player, and we just really connected, and I got into going back to church. And so for about the last 2 years of college, I was a lot more consistent, and I'm going to talk about consistency here a lot in a little bit. But I really rekindled that fire and passion with my relationship with Jesus. Then I was down and out, and I got concussions, and I kind of got into this headspace where why me? Kind of pity on myself, God, why'd you let this happen? And I would say that I was mad at God for a while. And it wasn't until I kind of picked myself up with CrossFit and started to build routine in my life that I also built that routine back with my faith. I started picking back up the pieces and putting those pieces back into place in my life. And one of those things was that consistency reading the Bible, consistency going to church, consistency praying. And I really found that I was in a good spot, and that led me to my wife. I think putting all those pieces back together led me to the right person, because I felt like I was ready to lead in a relationship. And then from there, I was ready to lead in my family. And throughout that time when I was a coach, I had a lot of practice, because right out of college, I got trusted to essentially lead a group of 400 plus people coming in from out of town on a daily basis. So I quickly had to develop leadership skills, and my leadership style is I tried to lead with the approach that I wanted to lead like Jesus would lead, and love like Jesus would love, and show people compassion like Jesus shows us compassion. And I wanted people to see Jesus through me and through my actions. And I say that because when you're in a setting like a gym, it's obviously, fairly secular. Yes, you have a lot of people that are believers and you have those relationships, but when you're leading a massive group of people at once, it's a lot of things. It's uncomfortable. It's hard. It's like, I'm not going to stand in the front of a classroom that I'm coaching a class with and, preach Jesus's name. But I always made it a point, and it was always my vision to show people love how Jesus shows us love. And that's really how I tried to lead that group of people. There came a point in my life, 2 years ago now, it was like the 2-year anniversary just passed recently, where we got robbed. And as a family, so my wife, myself, and we had our first son, Noah, at the time, that was probably the toughest part as a family, low point as a family. And it's funny, my wife Shay always says the saying that God said, "Get robbed and see what happens," because it's really seems like it's set us up to where we are now. Like when we got robbed, we had maybe $1,000 to our name. We had this 10-month-old. We had now, no place to live. My wife was like, "I'm not living there ever again." And that point in our life when we felt like we had like nowhere to turn, our privacy was invaded, we really just leaned into God. And that was a big time in my life where I felt like my relationship with God is what led my family through that time. Just kind of being an anchor along with my wife. And that's really kind of brought us to where we are today. And I think the biggest thing that has kept my faith and allows me to be a good leader is committing to consistency. I know that when I'm consistent with my own life and my own faith, I'm a consistent leader. My mindset is where it needs to be. The values that I show others are what they need to be in order to show Jesus through myself.
Yeah, dude, that's such an awesome story. Yeah, and I know that when I was in Austin about a month and a half ago now, you shared that story about being robbed. And yeah, I mean, that really is like, because I feel like, you pray that prayer, where David says, search my heart, test my anxious thoughts, and going through a moment like, like being robbed, that's really a testing time of, okay, where are my priorities actually at? Where am I at with, with even trusting God? Do I blame him for things like that, or do I trust him? Like you said earlier, about trials and tribulations, James tells us that, consider it pure joy when you go through those because they produce perseverance. And it's just such a, it's not natural, to think like that, but it's biblical. Like we don't naturally want to, go towards like considering it joy when we're going through these super tough times, but it's a command in Scripture to to consider it joy. And I love how you started that with, growing up going to church every Sunday, because I feel like so many people, myself included, do that. I went to church every Sunday, super involved in youth group, high school ministry. I led a Bible study in high school, but I had no relationship with Jesus. I, thought I was saved because I went to church and I did good things. And even then, like, I still didn't even do good things. I was still living like super worldly, but I thought that I was good because I was in church. And it really wasn't until I was in college that the Lord really woke me up. And just to see this, that idea of like, it's possible to have a saved soul, but a wasted life. And, I don't want to, be saved, yes, but not go tell others about it. And I don't want to, live a life that doesn't produce the fruits of the Spirit that God's called us to be, because, he says that, you'll be known as my disciple by how you love. And, like you said, like you wanting to emulate the life of Jesus through you by loving people, by being compassionate. And just as men, like, I just feel like we need more men to actually believe that, that it's not this masculine macho, thing, because Jesus says, in the Beatitudes about, being meek and mild, and for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Just that idea of like the lowly, the servants, and the last will be first, and that idea of like by humbling ourselves, that's actually how God exalts us up. So I love that you shared that, because that was part of my story, man. I went to church all the time, but didn't actually understand the gravity of it. And I just truly want guys your age, my age, older, younger, to actually, if you're gonna claim to be a believer, that actually it comes with things like, Jesus says, pick up your cross and follow me. Half the time Jesus was talking people out of following him. I mean, he wasn't, begging them to follow him, because when you start following him, it doesn't make things easier, but it makes life, like it doesn't make it easier, but he's walking with you through it. And, we believe that there's a heaven, and we believe that, if we believe this, then we'll have eternity with God. And that's greater than any success that we have on earth. That's greater than any, back squat or any, super fast mile. This having eternity with the one who created us is, what we long for and what we strive for. But I love how you talked about, Noah, and then what's your other son's name?
Wyatt.
Yeah.
Wyatt's the fresh one. He's 10 months old.
Yeah, the 10-month-old. So Noah and Wyatt. So, and even, your wife Shay, as a father and leader, as you kind of talked about earlier, what are some things that you feel like you've implemented in your marriage and, as being a father, that have kind of helped keep y'all grounded as a family? Yeah,
boy, it's been tough. I don't know how you guys have been handling things with a new child, but I just, through COVID, through having two young kids, our struggle right now is getting to church with two young kids. We have an interesting dynamic at home where our older son, Noah, has a hard time with other kids. I think because he's a COVID baby. He hasn't been around other kids, and he can't handle being in the nursery school or Sunday school. So wrestling with that right now. But from the beginning of our relationship has been built on faith. She also went to church growing up, but she wasn't a believer. Once we started dating, she actually was saved and was baptized. And that's something that I hold near and dear to my heart, is that she made that commitment, and we've been walking in that life ever since. But now having kids, it's kind of just building that consistency and showing our kids, even at the earliest of ages, this is what we do when, we pray to God. It's just something that we do. We've instilled, our 2-year-old, he prays for his food every day before he eats. And I know he doesn't know what God is yet, or he can't grasp that in his head, but I think just building this consistency in his life of this is what we believe and this is what we do. And he sees mommy and daddy praying. And, I think it's hard with little kids just because they don't grasp everything yet. But as parents, we're just doing it, everything we can to show him, again, like I said, show him love, show him how to love others, show him how to have compassion for his brother, teach him how to pray, teach him these habits that'll stick with him the rest of his life, and ultimately build that relationship with Jesus.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I know we kind of talked about it earlier on from a physical standpoint, with soccer and CrossFit and where you're at with BPN, but spiritually speaking, at what point, because you kind of shared, when you met Mike Leach, that, that kind of pivotal moment in your life, where would you say that, where did you realize that you're doing something bigger than yourself kind of in this life? That moment of, I'm Adam, I'm on this earth, but I love CrossFit, I love my family, but I feel like I'm doing something bigger, with my life.
Yeah. That's a tough one. I think it was a little bit more gradual for me rather than a aha moment. But I think the first couple of years of me coaching, which again was something that I've never done before. I was just an athlete who fell into coaching and developed a love for coaching. But I think as the years started to go by and I would build relationships with people, and I would help somebody lose 50 pounds, and I would be part of this person's journey, and they can now do this and they couldn't do this. And I worked with a 70-year-old woman who couldn't pick herself up off the ground, and now she's doing burpees. And when I started to realize that I was like actually changing people's life, and with that, if you change somebody's life physically, they're going to gravitate towards you as a person and almost gravitate towards whatever your values are, whatever your views are, whatever your beliefs are. So through those journeys with the people that I was working with, I was realizing that I was really being able to have a true positive impact, again, not just on their fitness, but like on their life as a whole. Like even like silly things, like, people would joke me like, oh, Adam never cusses. But you know what? The person that I now have a relationship, for a year with at the gym, who's been around me every single day for the past year, like they don't cuss anymore either. And I know that's like a very small, like superficial thing, but like, it changes people's hearts.
That's awesome. Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, that's just about being an example. Like that's what we're called to be. Like, Jesus says that we're the light of the world. And with that, we bear the responsibility of, being held accountable for our actions. And, the more that we can, show others the love of Christ, and the more people are going to be gravitated towards that. So I think that's awesome, though.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's one of those things where once you finally develop a platform, things just kind of take off. Another cool thing that I got to be a part of through coaching was we supported St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and did charity competitions, and I was able to put that on. And just to see then the impact we would have on children's lives and families' lives. I mean, we had people at these events who would break down into tears because they were surrounded by a community that was supporting them in their mission to save their child. I think as an athlete, you do have a very big platform, and you can use that for better or for worse. You had a platform being an athlete. I had a platform being an athlete, and I think it's all what you do with it. So I know that I've just been thankful to have that platform and still have that platform, and to be able to do good and love others. But yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that, and I just encourage them to be a positive impact.
Yeah. Dude, that's so awesome, because I know that, even like the whole theme of, kind of what we're doing here, even with this podcast, it really is, like I said earlier, like you're encouraging people to go out and train physically, go out and this week and do that Cindy challenge. But, at the same time, we also want to challenge you to train spiritually. Like, we don't want to ever put more emphasis on the physical training over the spiritual training, because that's just not the right order. That's just, we always want to, train ourselves spiritually, and then out of that, we can go to train physically. I know when I go to the gym now, I either have to listen to a sermon or I either have to listen to worship, because if I'm listening to, secular music, or if I'm listening to, something like that, then I'll get, okay, well, I can just, my mind can go into space of what do I look like, and just down these little rabbit trails that I don't want to go, because that's not what it's about. When it says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, that idea of how do I love God with my strength? And, by being physically active, by being just in good shape, my physical health affects my spiritual health, and vice versa. If I'm healthy physically, then I'm going to feel closer to God spiritually. And if I'm good with my spiritual life, then out of that, I enjoy going to train physically. And it's just kind of this like dance. I think that's so cool about what Paul tells us, that, because he acknowledges it, that it's of some value, but he just says that it's not of every value like the spiritual training is. So Adam, you've given us the Cindy challenge, which I'm going to go out and do this week, and I hopefully that it does not kill me. I don't know how many rounds I'm going to get. I will be nowhere near 27 though.
I'm gonna check in. So.
Oh yeah. Well, you're going to check in. All right. So you've given us the physical challenge, but now I want to ask you to give us the spiritual challenge to go out and to do this week.
Yeah. So you approached me with this question before we had this podcast, so I had a little time to think about it, and I think it'd be very easy for me to say, like, read your Bible every day for the next week, or read the book of Luke, or whatever. But I lead a group of ambassadors at BPN, and we have weekly calls. And something that I challenged them with on our last call last week was the idea of committing to consistency. I know everybody's different. I know everybody's at a different space in their life. I know that everybody's at a different spot in their relationship with Jesus. So my challenge to the listeners and to myself too, right? Like, I'm trying to always challenge myself in these things, is commit to consistency and pick one thing to start to build a habit with. It might be going to church once a week. It might be reading your Bible for 10 minutes a day. It might be listening to a sermon or Christian music while you work out instead of secular music. So, you're building, thoughts in your head that set you up in the right direction with your relationship with Jesus. So I don't know what that specific thing is for you personally, you that are listening to this. But for example, for me, I'm going to challenge myself 5 days out of the week. I'm going to read my Bible for 15 minutes a day. That's something that I struggle with, right? Picking up a Bible and reading it. One, I hate reading. Hate it. I tried to get out of honors English every single year so I didn't have to do the summer reading. So that's a big challenge for me, but that's something I want to build consistency with. So I'm going to challenge myself to reading my Bible most days of the week. I'll give myself a little bit grace there. So I want you to pick something that you want to be consistent with. I want you to pick something that you want to build a habit with, because habits are tough. They're hard to break. But if you can do that enough times, then it becomes something that you almost don't even think about anymore, and it just becomes something that you do, something that's a part of your life, and then you're now pushing yourself to greater limits in whatever it is, and hopefully it's your relationship with Jesus Christ.
Yep, there we go. I'm going to commit myself to, you said read your Bible for 15 minutes. I'm going to pray for 15 minutes, not just 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. I'm going to try to sit down and actually for 15 minutes just pray through what I got. So that is my spiritual challenge going to be this week for me. So I hope that you go out and do Cindy this week. I hope that you go out and, like Adam said, whatever spiritual challenge that you want to, that you want to challenge yourself with this week, go out and do it. And if you only do one of them, don't do the Cindy, do the spiritual challenge, because as we said, that is more important. So Adam, thanks so much for joining me, man, on my first podcast. This has been so awesome. Just a normal, just fun conversation. I know we have these all the time, but this was fun to get to actually sit down and talk and go through all these good things.
No, man, thanks. I appreciate you having me on, and it's been a pleasure.